The servant who silenced monsters. They said she was nothing. A ghost in servant's rags, scrubbing blood from stone while wolves in human skin tore each other apart above her head. But when Leora Vance hummed in the darkness of Blackridge Keep, warriors twice her size stopped mid-kill, their rage draining like water through cracked hands. In a fortress built on violence, where the Alpha King himself was unraveling under the weight of his own beast, one forgotten girl held a power no one understood, not even her. And the moment they discovered it, everything would burn. Stay until the end to see how she rises. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from. The stones of Blackridge Keep never stopped bleeding. Leora Vance had scrubbed them for 3 years, long enough to know that no amount of lye or salt would ever pull the iron stink from the cracks. The blood soaked too deep. It lived in the mortar now, in the foundation itself, a permanent record of what happened when you built a kingdom on wolf blood and war. She knelt in the east corridor, hands raw and cracked, working a brush against flagstones that had been stained rust-brown since before she arrived. Her knees ached, her back screamed. The bucket beside her sloshed with water gone pink an hour ago. Above her, boots thundered, voices roared, guttural, inhuman. Something shattered. Someone screamed. Leora didn't look up. She'd learned that in the first week. You didn't look. You didn't listen. You became stone yourself, silent and still, until the violence passed over you like a storm. Move, runt. The boot caught her ribs before she could shift. Not hard enough to break anything, they knew better than to damage the servants permanently, but enough to knock her sideways into the bucket. Pink water slopped across the floor. Leora gasped, vision sparking white, but she didn't cry out. Crying out was dangerous. The warrior, Garrick, she thought, though they all looked the same in their leather and fury, stepped over her without a second glance. His hands were bloody to the elbows. He left red prints on the wall as he passed. She waited until his footsteps faded. Then she sat up, dripping, and started over. The east corridor led to the training yards, which meant it saw the worst of the traffic. Warriors came through here straight from the sparring pits, still half-shifted, still riding the high of violence. They tracked mud and blood, and gods knew what else across stones Leora had just cleaned. They shoved past her, knocked her down, stepped on her hands. She was furniture to them. Less than furniture. At least furniture didn't bleed. Leora. The voice came from behind, low, female, careful. Leora glanced back. Mirren stood in the shadows of a side passage, her own hands wrapped in rags, her face gaunt. She'd been here longer than Leora. 5 years? Maybe 6. Long enough that her eyes had gone flat, her voice scraped thin. Captain's asking for you. Leora's stomach dropped. Why? Doesn't say why to me. Mirren's mouth twitched, not quite a smile, too bitter for that. Just said get the singing girl. The singing girl. Leora's throat tightened. She hadn't been singing. She'd been humming, barely audible, just something to fill the silence while she worked. A melody from the valley, from before. She didn't even realize she was doing it half the time. I wasn't... Doesn't matter. Mirren jerked her chin toward the main hall. Go. Don't keep him waiting. Leora pushed to her feet, water streaming from her skirt. Her ribs throbbed where Garrick's boot had landed. She left the bucket, left the brush, and followed Mirren's directions through the maze of corridors that made up Blackridge Keep. The keep wasn't beautiful. It wasn't meant to be. It was a fortress carved from the bones of the northern mountains, built to hold a single pass against enemies on 3 sides. Thick walls, narrow windows, floors slick with damp and decades of violence. It smelled like iron and wet stone and the musk of too many predators packed into too small a space. Leora had grown up in a valley town called Green Hollow, a place with gardens and sunlight and people who didn't tear each other apart for sport. She'd been 12 when the Wolf Blood Army swept through, 12 when they burned the fields, killed the men, and dragged the survivors north in chains. She was 15 now. Green Hollow was ash. Her family was gone, and she was here, scrubbing blood from stone, trying to stay invisible, trying to survive. The main hall stretched wide and cold, lit by torches that threw shadows across the vaulted ceiling. A long table dominated the center, scarred oak, big enough to seat 30. Right now it seated 5. Captain Reese sat at the head, a broad-shouldered man with silver streaking his dark hair, and a scar that split his jaw from ear to chin. He wasn't the alpha. That was King Darien, who ruled from the high tower. But Rhys ran the day-to-day. He kept order. He kept the wolves from eating each other. Mostly. The four warriors seated with him looked up as Leora approached. Their eyes tracked her movement, predator instinct, sizing up prey. One of them grinned, showing too many teeth. Leora stopped 6 feet from the table and dropped her gaze to the floor. "You sent for me, Captain." "Yeah." Rhys leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. His voice was gravel and smoke. "You're the one who hums." It wasn't a question. I didn't mean to disturb anyone, sir. I'll stop." "Didn't say I wanted you to stop." Leora risked a glance up. Rhys was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Not angry, not amused, something else. "The king heard you," he said. The room went very still. Leora's heart kicked against her ribs. What?" "2 nights ago. You were working the south wing. He was passing through." Rhys tilted his head. Said it was the first time in months he didn't want to tear someone's throat out. One of the warriors snorted. "Soft." Rhys didn't look away from Leora. "King wants you upstairs." "No." The word fell out before she could stop it. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Rhys's eyes narrowed. "No?" Leora's mouth was dry. Her pulse was a drum in her ears. But she'd heard the stories. Every servant had. The king's chambers were on the top floor of the high tower, and the girls who went up there didn't always come back down. And the ones who did, they didn't talk about it. I'm just a servant, sir. I don't... You think I'm asking?" Rhys's voice cut like a blade. "The king wants you. You go, or I drag you. Your choice." Leora's knees locked. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream. But there was nowhere to run to, and screaming only made things worse. She swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." "Good." Rhys stood, his chair scraping loud against stone. "Let's go." "Okay." The high tower was colder than the rest of the keep. Leora followed Rhys up a spiral staircase that seemed to go on forever, her legs shaking, her breath coming short. The walls here were bare stone, no tapestries, no torches, just narrow slits for windows that let in knives of wind and pale northern light. At the top, a single door, iron-banded oak, thick as a man's chest. Rhys knocked once, didn't wait for an answer, pushed it open. "She's here." He stepped aside, gesturing Leora through. She hesitated. Everything in her screamed to turn around, to run back down those stairs and take her chances in the corridors below. But Rhys's hand was on her shoulder, firm, and then she was moving forward, crossing the threshold into a room. Just a room. Leora blinked, disoriented. She'd expected, she didn't know what. Chains, maybe. Blood. Darkness. Instead, there was a hearth with a low fire. A table covered in maps and papers. Shelves lined with books. A single chair by the window. And standing beside it, staring out at the mountains, was the Alpha King, Darien Crow. Leora had seen him before. Everyone had. He walked the ramparts sometimes, inspected the troops, presided over executions in the yard. But she'd never been this close. He was tall. Taller than Rhys, broader through the shoulders, built like something carved from the mountain itself. His hair was black, worn long enough to tie back, though half of it had come loose. His hands, resting on the windowsill, were scarred across the knuckles, the backs, the palms. He didn't turn around. "Leave us," he said. His voice was low, rough, not loud, but it filled the space like a physical thing. Rhys inclined his head. "Sire." The door closed with a soft thud. Leora stood frozen, her heart trying to claw its way out of her chest. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Darien spoke again, still facing the window. "You're afraid of me." Leora's throat worked. She didn't answer. "Smart." He turned then, and she saw his face properly for the first time. He wasn't handsome, not in any soft way. His features were too harsh, too worn. A scar cut through his left eyebrow. Another traced his jaw. His eyes were pale, wolf gray, she'd heard them called, and they pinned her in place like a hand around her throat. But it was the exhaustion that startled her. The deep, bone-grinding weariness in the set of his shoulders, the lines around his mouth. He looked like a man holding himself together by sheer force of will. What's your name? He asked.
Lyora, sire.
How old are you? 15? Something flickered in his expression, too fast to name. He turned back to the window. You hum when you work. It wasn't a question, but Lyora answered anyway. Yes, sire. I'm sorry. I didn't mean, don't apologize. His voice was sharp. I'm not angry. Silence. Lyora waited, shaking, while the fire crackled and the wind howled outside. Finally, Darian said, Do you know what it's like? To have something inside you that wants to destroy everything you touch? Lyora's breath caught. She didn't know how to answer that. No, he continued, quieter now. You wouldn't. You're human. Human. The way he said it, like it was something precious, something lost. We're born with it, Darian said. The wolf. It's part of us from the first breath. Most of us learn to control it, to coexist. But the stronger the bloodline, the harder it fights. And when you're the alpha, it never stops. It's always there, always pushing, always trying to break free. He flexed his hands, and Lyora saw the way his fingers curled, almost like claws. I haven't slept more than an hour at a time in 6 months, he said. Every time I close my eyes, it's there, clawing at the edges. And when I wake up, he trailed off, shaking his head. I've killed 3 men in my sleep this year. Good men. Warriors I trusted. Lyora's stomach turned. The council wants me to step down, Darian continued. They think I'm losing control. They're probably right. He turned to face her again, and his eyes were hollow. But then I heard you, 2 nights ago. I was walking past the south wing, and you were humming. Some little tune, I don't even know what. And for the first time in half a year, the wolf went quiet. Lyora stared at him. I don't understand what you did, Darian said. I don't know if you even know, but I need... He stopped, jaw working. I need it to stop, just for a little while, just long enough to think. He looked at her, and for a moment he wasn't a king. He was just a man on the edge of breaking. Will you do it again? He asked. Lyora's voice came out barely a whisper. I don't know how. Just hum, like you did before. Lyora swallowed. I didn't even realize I was doing it. Then don't think about it. Darian moved to the chair by the fire and sat down heavily, like his bones ached. Just do whatever you were doing, please, please. An alpha king begging a servant girl. Lyora didn't know what to do, didn't know what was happening, but the look in his eyes, the desperation there, was something she recognized. She'd seen it in the mirror often enough. So she took a breath, steadied herself, and started to hum. The melody came without thinking, something her mother used to sing back in Green Hollow. A lullaby, maybe, or a harvest song. Lyora didn't remember the words anymore, just the shape of the tune, the rise and fall of it. She hummed softly, barely audible over the crackling fire, and watched as the Alpha King's shoulders slowly began to unwind. His eyes closed, his breathing deepened, the tension in his jaw eased. For the first time since she'd entered the room, he looked like he might actually be at peace. Lyora kept humming. She didn't know how long she stood there, 10 minutes, 20, an hour. Time folded strange in the firelight, but eventually Darian's breathing evened out into something that might have been sleep. Lyora let the melody fade, watched him for a moment longer. This man who held a kingdom together through sheer brutality, now slumped in a chair like a child finally granted rest. Then quietly, she turned toward the door. Don't. His voice stopped her cold. Darian's eyes were still closed, but his hand had moved to the arm of the chair, gripping it white-knuckled. Stay, he said. Just a little longer. Lyora hesitated. Then she nodded, even though he couldn't see it, and started humming again. Outside, the wind screamed across the mountains. Inside, for the first time in months, the monster slept. They called for her the next night, and the night after that. By the end of the week, it had become routine. Lyora would finish her work in the lower halls, and Rhys would appear, silent and gruff, to escort her up the spiral stairs. She'd enter the king's chambers, hum until he fell asleep, and then slip back down to the servants' quarters before dawn. The other servants noticed. Of course they noticed. Where do you go at night? Mirren asked one morning, her voice carefully neutral as they hauled water from the well. The king's chambers, Leora said, because there was no point lying. Mirren's hands tightened on the bucket. Does he? No. Leora cut her off. Nothing like that. He asks me to hum. That's all. Mirren stared at her like she'd grown a second head. I know how it sounds. Do you? Mirren set the bucket down with a thud. Leora, listen to me. The king doesn't summon servants for humming. Whatever's happening up there, I'm telling you the truth. Leora met her eyes. That's all it is. I hum, he sleeps, I leave. That's it. Mirren didn't look convinced, but she didn't push, just picked up her bucket and walked away, shaking her head. The warriors noticed too. Leora felt their eyes on her now when she moved through the halls, tracking her, weighing her. Whispers followed in her wake. That's the one. The singing girl. What's she got that we don't? Some of them were curious, some were jealous, and some, like Garrick, the one who'd kicked her that first day, were openly hostile. Think you're special now? He sneered one afternoon, cornering her in a narrow passage. Think the king's gonna protect you? Leora pressed herself against the wall, pulse hammering. I'm just doing what I'm told. Yeah? Garrick leaned in close, and she could smell the blood on him, the violence. Well, here's what I'm telling you. You're still nothing. You're still a servant, and the second the king gets bored, you're mine. He shoved past her hard enough to slam her into stone, and stalked off laughing. Leora stood there shaking until her legs remembered how to move. It was Reese who explained it to her. 3 weeks in, he stopped her on the stairs one night and said, You know why he needs you, don't you? Leora shook her head. Reese sighed, scrubbing a hand over his scarred face. The wolf blood. It's not just strength, it's rage, primal, endless rage. Most of us learn to channel it, control it. But the king, he trailed off, choosing his words carefully. He's the strongest of us, which means his wolf is the strongest too. And it's been trying to break free for years. Why now? Leora asked. Why is it worse now? War, Reese said simply. We've been fighting for 5 years straight. The southern kingdoms, the eastern clans, the mercenary bands out of the Blackwood. Every battle, every kill, it feeds the wolf, and the king's been at the front of all of it. He looked at her, and his expression was grim. He's killing himself to keep this kingdom alive, Reese said. And if he breaks, if the wolf takes over completely, he'll tear through this keep like a wildfire. He'll kill everyone. You, me, every warrior and servant and child in these walls. He won't mean to. He won't even remember it, but it'll happen. Leora's blood ran cold. Then why keep him in power? Reese's mouth twisted. Because the alternative is worse. The nobles are circling like vultures, waiting for him to fall so they can carve up the kingdom between them. And the second they do, our enemies will pour through the pass and slaughter everyone north of the Ironwood. He stepped closer, and his voice dropped. So yeah, he said, whatever you're doing, whatever magic or gift or God's damned miracle you've got, you keep doing it because you're the only thing keeping him sane. And he's the only thing keeping us alive. The weight of it settled on Leora's shoulders like stone. I'm just humming, she whispered. I don't care if you're dancing naked and singing bawdy songs, Reese said flatly. It's working, so don't stop. He turned and continued up the stairs, leaving Leora alone in the cold. That night, when she entered the king's chambers, Darian was standing by the window again, his usual spot. But this time, he was bleeding. Fresh cuts across his knuckles, his forearms, like he'd been fighting, or like he'd been clawing at himself. Sire, don't. His voice was raw. Just do what you do. Leora crossed to him slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. Up close, she could see the tremor in his hands, the way his jaw was locked tight. Did something happen? She asked quietly. Execution, he said. A deserter. I had to make an example. He turned his hands over, staring at the blood drying on his palms. I didn't mean to make it last as long as it did, he said. But the wolf, it wanted more. It always wants more. Leora didn't know what to say to that, so she started humming instead. The melody wrapped around them both, soft and low, filling the space between heartbeats. Darian closed his eyes. His breathing slowed. My mother used to sing, he said suddenly. Before she died. I was 6. I don't remember the songs anymore, just the feeling of them. Safe. Warm. Leora kept humming. I haven't felt safe in 20 years, Darian continued, his voice barely audible. Isn't that pathetic? A king afraid of his own shadow. You're not afraid of your shadow, Leora said, pausing the melody. You're afraid of the monster inside you. That's different. He opened his eyes, looking at her with something like surprise. You're not what I expected, he said. What did you expect? Someone who'd cower. Someone who'd lie to make me feel better. His mouth twisted. Everyone else does. I'm too tired to lie, Leora said honestly. And I've been cowering for 3 years. It doesn't help. Darian huffed, almost a laugh. No, I suppose it doesn't. He moved to the chair and Leora resumed humming, the melody weaving through the firelight and shadow. And for a little while, the war outside and the monsters within both went quiet. It couldn't last. Leora knew that, even if she didn't want to admit it. This fragile peace, these stolen hours, they were borrowed time. Sooner or later, something would shatter it. She just didn't expect it to happen so soon. It was a month in when she overheard the conversation. She was cleaning the great hall, late, after the warriors had finished their evening meal and stumbled off to the barracks or the brothels in the lower city. She was alone, or thought she was, scrubbing grease from the long table. Then voices drifted from the side chamber, low, conspiratorial. Leora froze. Can't keep ignoring it, someone said. Male, older, Lord Theron maybe, one of the nobles. We're not ignoring it. A second voice, smoother. Lord Voss. We're being strategic. Strategic. Theron's voice dripped contempt. The king is mad, Voss. He's barely holding on. And now he's got that servant girl following him around like a talisman, which is exactly why we wait. Voss's tone sharpened. The girl is proof he's losing control, needing a child to keep him sane. It makes him look weak. So what do you propose? We let him unravel a little more. Then we move. Quietly. Frame it as mercy. Put the Mad King down before he kills us all. Install a proper council. Restore order. And the girl? A pause. Then Voss said, collateral damage. Leora's stomach turned to ice. What about the wolf bloods? Theron pressed. Rhys, the captains, they're loyal to him. They're loyal to strength, Voss corrected. And when we show them their king is broken beyond repair, they'll fall in line. They always do. Footsteps. Moving closer to the door. Leora bolted, abandoning her brush, darting back into the shadows of the hall just as the two nobles emerged. She pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing, as they passed. Neither of them looked her way. When their footsteps faded, Leora sagged, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. They were planning to kill him. And her. She had to warn him. But when she reached the high tower that night, Rhys stopped her at the door. Not tonight, he said. What? Why? King's orders. He's meeting with the council. Says he doesn't need you. Leora's pulse spiked. Captain, I have to talk to him. It's important. Then tell me. She hesitated. Could she trust Rhys? He'd always been gruff but fair, and he clearly cared about the king's survival. But what if... Leora. Rhys's voice gentled, barely, but enough. What's wrong? She took a breath and told him everything she'd heard. Rhys's expression darkened with every word. By the time she finished, his hand was on the hilt of his sword. Theron and Voss, he said quietly. You're sure? Yes. Damn. He turned, pacing. I knew the council was restless, but this... We have to tell the king, Leora said urgently. We will. But not tonight. Rhys shook his head. If we interrupt a council meeting with accusations like this, it'll only make things worse. Theron and Voss will deny everything. The other nobles will close ranks, and the king will look paranoid. Then what do we do? Rhys met her eyes. We watch, we wait, and we gather proof. Leora wanted to scream. Watching and waiting felt like surrender. But Rhys was right. Without proof, it was just the word of a servant against two of the most powerful nobles in the kingdom. Fine, she said, but we don't have much time. I know. Reese's jaw tightened. I'll keep eyes on them. You, stay close to the king. If they make a move, he'll need you. Leora nodded, though dread coiled in her gut. As she turned to leave, Reese called after her. Leora. She looked back. Whatever happens, he said, don't let them make you small again. You're more than they think. Remember that. She didn't know how to answer, so she just nodded and disappeared down the stairs, back into the cold and the dark. Above her in the high tower, the Alpha King met with men who wanted him dead. And below, in the shadows, a forgotten girl began to realize that survival wasn't enough anymore. If she wanted to live, if she wanted him to live, she'd have to fight, even if it meant stepping into the light, even if it meant burning. 3 days passed like holding your breath underwater. Leora scrubbed floors and hauled water and tried to act like nothing had changed, but her skin felt too tight. Her nerves scraped raw. Every footstep behind her might be an assassin. Every whispered conversation might be the conspiracy tightening its noose. She watched Theron and Voss during meals, the way they sat too close together, heads bent in conversation, the way other nobles drifted toward them like iron to a lodestone. Lord Herrick, Lady Senna, even young Lord Petran, who'd always seemed harmless. How many of them were in on it? Reese had men watching, he'd told her, discreet, loyal. But every time Leora caught sight of the captain, his expression was grimmer than before. They were running out of time, and they both knew it. The king didn't call for her those 3 nights. Leora told herself it was fine. He had council meetings, strategy sessions, a kingdom to hold together. But by the 4th night, when Reese finally appeared at her door and jerked his head toward the stairs, the relief that flooded through her was almost painful. She followed him up in silence. He didn't speak until they reached the top. He's bad tonight, Reese said quietly. Worse than I've seen him in weeks. What happened? Border skirmish, lost 15 men. Reese's jaw worked. He had to tell their families himself, and then Theron, that bastard, suggested in front of the whole council that maybe the king's judgment was compromised. Leora's stomach dropped. What did the king say? Nothing. Just stared at him until Theron shut up. Reese glanced at her. But I could see it. The wolf was right there, just under the surface. Another few seconds and he would have ripped Theron's throat out in the middle of the hall. Maybe he should have, Leora muttered. Reese almost smiled. You're starting to sound like one of us. Then his expression sobered. Go, he needs you. Leora pushed open the door. The room was dark. The fire had burned down to embers, and the candles were guttering. For a moment she thought he wasn't there. Then she saw him. Darian stood in the far corner, facing the wall, his shoulders hunched and trembling. One hand was pressed flat against the stone. The other was clenched at his side, knuckles white. Blood dripped from his fingers. Sire, don't come closer. His voice was barely human, ground glass and gravel. Not yet. Leora froze. She'd seen him tired before, haunted. But this was different. This was a man barely holding himself inside his own skin. I can leave, she said carefully. If you need, no. The word cracked. Stay. Just stay where you are and sing. Not hum, sing. Leora's throat tightened. She'd never sung for him before, never sung for anyone, not since Green Hollow. Humming was easy, anonymous. Singing meant words, meant emotion, meant offering up something raw. But he was shaking so hard she could see it from across the room, so she opened her mouth and let the melody out. Sleep now, the night is cold. The stars keep watch. The dark grows old. Dream soft. Let worry fade. The dawn will come. Don't be afraid. Her mother's lullaby. She hadn't realized she still remembered the words. Darian's shoulders hitched. His breathing was ragged, too fast. Leora kept singing, pouring every ounce of calm she could summon into the words. The wind may howl, the shadows creep, but I am here, so rest, just sleep. Let go the weight, the fear, the fight. I'll guard your dreams through all the night. Slowly, so slowly, the trembling eased. Darian's breathing deepened. His hand slid down the wall until his arm hung loose at his side. When the last note faded, he turned around. His eyes were still wolf gray, still too bright, but the wildness had retreated. He looked exhausted, hollowed out. Thank you, he said hoarsely. Leora crossed the room before she could think better of it. Let me see your hand. He blinked, surprised, but held it out. The cuts weren't deep, just gouges where his nails had dug in, half shifted to claws and then back again. She'd seen wounds like this on warriors who fought the change too hard. You need to wrap this, she said. It'll heal, not if you keep clawing yourself open. She looked around, spotted a water basin and some clean cloth on the side table. Without asking permission, she crossed to it, dampened the cloth, and returned. Darian watched her with an unreadable expression as she took his hand and began to clean the blood away. You're not afraid of me, he said. I am, Leora said honestly. I'm just tired of letting fear make my decisions. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. Rhys said you'd changed. Rhys talks too much. This time he did smile, faint and brief. Then it faded. I almost killed Theron today. Leora's hand stilled. I know. He's right, you know. My judgment is compromised. I can't think straight anymore. Every decision feels like wading through mud. And the wolf... He broke off, shaking his head. It's winning. Inch by inch, it's taking over. Then fight harder. You think I'm not? His voice sharpened. You think I haven't been fighting every second of every day for the last 6 months? I think you're fighting own, Leora said quietly. She finished wrapping his hand and met his eyes. And I think that's exactly what they want. Darian frowned. What are you talking about? She hesitated. Rhys had said to wait for proof. But looking at the exhaustion carved into Darian's face, the barely leashed desperation, she couldn't keep silent. Theron and Voss, she said. They're planning something. I heard them talking 4 nights ago. They want you gone. The temperature in the room dropped. Explain, Darian said, his voice suddenly flat and cold. Leora told him everything. The conversation she'd overheard, the way the nobles had been clustering together, the timetable that felt like it was accelerating. When she finished, Darian was silent for a long moment. Then he said, You told Rhys? Yes, he's been watching them. And has he found proof? Not yet. Darian's jaw tightened. Then it's your word against 2 of the most powerful men in my council. I know what I heard. I believe you. He turned away, pacing to the window. But belief isn't enough. If I move against them without proof, the other nobles will see it as paranoia. They'll close ranks. And if I'm wrong, if you misheard, or if they were just venting frustration, I'll have fractured what's left of my council over nothing. And if I'm right and you do nothing, then I'm dead. He said it matter-of-factly, like commenting on the weather. But at least the kingdom survives. The council installs a new ruler, someone stable, and the defenses hold. Leora stared at him. You can't actually believe that. Why not? Because they don't want stability. They want power. She crossed to him, anger flaring hot in her chest. You think Theron and Voss care about the kingdom? They care about carving it up between them. The second you're gone, they'll tear each other apart, and then the real enemies will pour through the pass and slaughter everyone. Darian looked at her, something shifting in his expression. Rhys said the same thing. Then maybe you should listen. I'm listening, his voice gentled. But I need proof, Leora. I need something solid. Otherwise, I'm just a mad king lashing out at shadows. She wanted to scream, wanted to shake him, but he was right, and she hated it. Then we find proof, she said. How? I don't know yet. She lifted her chin. But we will. Darian studied her for a long moment. Then quietly, he said, You're braver than half my warriors. I'm terrified. I know. That's what makes it brave. Before Leora could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Sharp, urgent. Darian's hand went to the knife at his belt. Enter. Rhys stepped in, his face grim. We have a problem. The problem, it turned out, was in the kitchens. Leora followed Darian and Rhys down through the keep, her pulse hammering. Rhys didn't explain, just led them through twisting corridors until they reached the vast stone kitchen that fed the fortress. It was chaos. Servants were shouting, warriors were shoving, and in the center of it all, the head cook, a grizzled woman named Marta, stood with her arms crossed, blocking access to the larder. I don't care if you're hungry, she barked at a cluster of wolf bloods. No one eats until I say so. Out of the way, old woman, one of them growled. Make me. Darian's voice cut through the noise like a blade. What's going on here? Everyone froze. Marta turned, saw the king, and her expression shifted, relief mixed with fury. Sire, thank the... She stopped herself. We've got a situation. Explain. Marta gestured to the larder behind her. The rations for the East Barracks. Someone tampered with them. Leora's stomach dropped. Darian's eyes narrowed. Tampered how? Poison, most likely. Maybe something slower. Marta's mouth was a thin line. Found it during prep. One of the grain sacks smelled wrong. Sweet, chemical. I tested it on a rat. Dead in 5 minutes. The room went silent. How much was contaminated? Reese asked. Half the East Barracks supply. Maybe more. Marta looked at Darian. If I hadn't caught it, we'd have lost 50 men by morning. 50 men. The king's elite warriors. Leora's mind raced. The East Barracks housed Darian's personal guard, the soldiers most loyal to him, the ones who'd die before letting anyone touch him. This wasn't random. This was targeted. Darian's expression had gone cold and flat, the look of a predator deciding how to kill. Lock down the kitchens. No one in or out until we know who did this. Already done, sire. And get the guards to inventory every food store in this keep. If they poisoned the East Barracks, they might have hit others. Marta nodded and turned to bark orders at her staff. Darian looked at Reese. Get me names. Everyone who had access to the larder in the last 3 days. On it. As Reese strode off, Darian turned to leave, then stopped, his gaze landing on something across the room. Leora followed his line of sight. Lord Voss stood near the doorway, watching. He wasn't doing anything suspicious, just observing, like half the nobles who'd been drawn by the commotion. But the look on his face, satisfaction, quickly masked, made Leora's blood run cold. Darian saw it too. His hand tightened on the hilt of his knife. For a moment, Leora thought he was going to cross the room and gut Voss right there. Then he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing on stone. Leora hurried after him. Okay. They didn't speak until they were back in the high tower, the door barred behind them. Darian stood in the center of the room, breathing hard, his whole body vibrating with barely contained rage. It was them, he said. We don't know that for sure. It was them. His voice was a snarl. Poison the East Barracks, kill my personal guard, leave me vulnerable, then move in and finish the job. It's exactly what Voss would do. Then arrest him, interrogate him. On what grounds? Being in the kitchen? Darian laughed, bitter and sharp. He'll say he was checking on the commotion like everyone else, and without proof, we'll find proof. Will we? He turned on her, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw real despair in his eyes. Or will they just keep coming, keep picking away, until there's nothing left to defend? You can't give up. I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic. He dragged a hand through his hair. I'm one man, Leora. One very tired man with a monster trying to claw its way out of his skull, and there are a dozen nobles with money and soldiers and time. The math doesn't work. Then change the math. How? Leora didn't have an answer. Not yet. But watching him unravel, watching the strongest person she'd ever met buckle under the weight of betrayal and exhaustion, something hot and furious ignited in her chest. She'd spent 3 years being small, being invisible, letting the world grind her down because she thought that was the only way to survive. But survival wasn't enough anymore. We find who poisoned the food, she said. We prove it was Voss or Theron, and then we make them pay. Darian stared at her. You sound like a wolf blood. Maybe I'm learning, he huffed, almost a laugh. Then his expression sobered. If we're wrong about this, if we move against them and fail, they'll kill you, Leora. Not quickly, not cleanly. They'll make an example. I know. Then why are you doing this? Because you saved me, she thought. Because you're the first person in 3 years who saw me as something other than furniture or prey. Because if you fall, everyone falls, and I'm tired of watching the world burn. But what she said was, because someone has to. Darian looked at her for a long moment, then quietly he said, You're going to get yourself killed. Probably. And you're doing it anyway. Yes. He shook his head, but there was something almost like admiration in his eyes. You're insane. I'm a survivor, Leora corrected. There's a difference. Before he could respond, another knock at the door, quieter this time. Come, Darian called. Rhys entered, and his expression told them everything before he opened his mouth. We've got a name, he said. One of the kitchen boys. 12 years old, been here 6 months. Said a nobleman paid him to add powder to the grain sacks. Which nobleman? Darian's voice was deadly quiet. He doesn't know. Said the man wore a hood, met him in the lower city. Rhys paused. But the boy described the ring, gold, with a falcon seal. Leora's breath caught. Theron's house sigil was a falcon. Darian's eyes blazed. Where's the boy now? Locked in the cells? But Rhys hesitated. Theron's already heard. He's demanding to see the boy, says he'll prove his innocence. Of course he does. Darian's smile was all teeth. Let him come. We'll see what the boy says to his face. They dragged the boy up from the cells an hour later, a scrawny kid with wide, terrified eyes and bruises already blooming on his arms where the guards had hauled him up the stairs. The great hall had been hastily assembled into a makeshift court. Darian sat in the high seat, Rhys at his right hand. The nobles clustered on the benches, Theron front and center, his expression carefully neutral. Voss sat beside him, watching everything with cold calculation. The boy was shoved into the center of the hall. He stumbled, caught himself, and stood trembling. What's your name? Darian asked. Pip, sire. His voice was barely a whisper. Look at me, Pip. The boy raised his eyes. He looked like he might faint. I'm told you put poison in the grain sacks, Darian said. Is that true? Pip's throat worked. I didn't know it was poison, sire. I swear. The man said it was medicine to help the warriors sleep better. And you believed him? He paid me. Pip's eyes filled with tears. 5 silver. My mum's sick. I needed the coin. Murmurs rippled through the hall, some sympathetic, some disgusted. This man, Darian continued. Describe him. Tall. Wore a dark cloak with the hood up. I didn't see his face. Pip hesitated. But I saw his hand when he gave me the coin. He wore a ring, gold, with a bird on it. Every eye in the hall turned to Theron. The nobleman stood slowly, his face flushed with anger. This is absurd. Is it? Darian's voice was ice. You're taking the word of a child, a criminal, over mine? Theron gestured sharply. Half the nobles in this hall wear signet rings. A falcon is hardly unique. This is a setup, and a poor one at that. Then explain why the poison targeted my personal guard. I can't explain the actions of traitors and fools, Theron's voice rose. But I will not stand here and be accused based on the fantasies of a terrified boy who's clearly been coached. Coached by whom? Rhys interjected. The king? Or maybe you're suggesting I coerced him. I'm suggesting, Theron said coldly, that someone very clever is trying to turn us against each other. And you're all playing right into it. Voss stood as well, his voice calm and measured. Lord Theron is right. We're in the middle of a war. Our enemies would love nothing more than to see us fracture from within. A planted agent, a convenient scapegoat. It's textbook. Other nobles began to murmur agreement. Leora watched from the shadows near the wall, her fists clenched. They were slipping away. Theron and Voss were too smooth, too prepared. And the boy, Pip, was starting to falter under the scrutiny, his story sounding less certain with every question. I saw the ring, he said again, but his voice cracked. I swear. Or you saw a ring, Voss said gently, and now you're confused, frightened. It's understandable. No one blames you, boy. Darian's jaw was tight. Leora could see the frustration radiating off him, the knowledge that he was losing control of the room. She had to do something. Before she could think it through, she stepped forward. I believe him. Every head turned. Theron's eyes narrowed. And who are you? No one, Leora said. Her voice was steadier than she felt. Just a servant. But I know what it's like to be invisible in this keep, and I know that invisible people see things no one else does. This is not your concern, girl, Theron snapped. It is if you're trying to kill my king. The hall went silent. Theron's face darkened. How dare you? Enough. Darian's voice cut through the rising noise. He looked at Leora, and she couldn't read his expression. Step back. She didn't move. Sire, if we just step back. It wasn't a request. Leora's heart sank, but she obeyed, retreating to the shadows. Darian stood, and the weight of his presence filled the hall. Lord Theron, Lord Voss, you make compelling points. Without concrete evidence, I cannot in good conscience accuse you of treason. Theron's shoulders relaxed slightly. However, Darian continued, his voice hardening, the fact remains that someone poisoned my food stores. Someone with access and means. So until we find the real culprit, I'm placing the entire noble quarter under watch. No one leaves the keep, no private meetings, no unsupervised access to supplies or armories. You're confining us? Voss's tone was dangerously quiet. I'm protecting you, Darian said. After all, if there's a traitor among us, you're just as much at risk as I am, aren't you? The two men stared at him, and Leora could see the calculation behind their eyes. They couldn't refuse without looking guilty. Of course, sire, Theron said tightly. Whatever you think best. Good. Darian gestured to the guards. Take the boy back to the cells. We'll continue this investigation in the morning. As the hall began to empty, Leora slipped out through a side door, her chest tight with frustration. She'd tried, and failed. She was halfway to the servants' quarters when a hand caught her arm. She spun and found herself face to face with Voss. Walk with me, he said pleasantly. It wasn't a request. He led her through the corridors, his grip firm but not painful, until they reached a narrow alcove away from prying eyes. Then he released her and smiled. You're a clever girl, Voss said. Brave, too, standing up in front of the whole hall like that. Leora's pulse hammered. I was just telling the truth. Were you? His smile didn't waver. Or were you trying to protect your position? After all, you've grown quite close to the king, haven't you? It would be a shame if he no longer needed you. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Voss stepped closer. Let me be clear, Leora. You're in a very dangerous position. The king is unstable. His enemies are circling. And you, a servant girl with no family, no allies, no power, you're caught in the middle. I'm not afraid of you. You should be. His voice dropped, losing all pretense of warmth. I could have you killed tonight. A tragic accident. No one would question it. No one would care. Leora forced herself to meet his eyes. Then why haven't you? Voss tilted his head, studying her. Because I'm giving you a chance. Walk away. Stop meddling. Disappear back into the shadows where you belong. Do that, and you get to live. And if I don't? Then you burn with him. He said it so casually, like discussing the weather. Leora's hands were shaking, but she kept her voice level. I'm not going anywhere. Voss sighed, almost disappointed. Pity. I actually liked you. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. That boy, Pip. He won't make it through the night, just so you know. Horror washed over her. You can't. I can, and I will. Voss glanced back, and his smile was sharp as a knife. Loose ends, dear girl. We can't have them. Then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Leora stood frozen, her mind racing. Pip was going to die. They were going to kill him to silence him, and without his testimony, there was no proof, no case, nothing. She had to warn someone. Rhys, the king, anyone. She turned and ran. Boy. She found Rhys in his barracks, coordinating the new guard rotations. He took one look at her face and pulled her aside. What happened? Leora told him, the words tumbling out in a rush. By the time she finished, Rhys's expression was murderous. That bastard threatened you? That doesn't matter. Rhys, the boy... I'll get him moved. Put him under my personal watch. Rhys was already moving, barking orders to nearby guards. Within minutes, a detachment was dispatched to the cells. They returned 10 minutes later, empty-handed. He's gone, sir, the lead guard reported. Cells open, no sign of him. Rhys's face went white. Search the keep, now. But Leora already knew. They weren't going to find Pip alive. And when dawn broke and a servant discovered the small body in the lower cistern, drowned, they'd say, an accident, no one would question it, no one except her. She stood in the corridor, shaking with rage and grief and a horrible bone-deep certainty. Voss had won this round. But the game wasn't over. Not yet. Not yet. The words echoed in Leora's head as she walked back to the servants' quarters, her legs moving on autopilot while her mind raced. Around her, the keep was settling into its uneasy night routine. Warriors heading to the barracks, servants finishing their tasks, torches guttering low in their brackets. Everything looked normal. Everything was a lie. She didn't sleep. Couldn't. She lay on her thin pallet in the corner of the communal room, listening to the other servants snore and shift, while her thoughts spun in tighter and tighter circles. Pip was dead. The proof was gone, and Voss had made it clear she was next if she didn't back down. The smart thing would be to disappear. Keep her head down, scrub her floors, survive. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Pip's terrified face in that hall, heard his voice crack as he tried to tell the truth. He'd been 12 years old, and they'd killed him like he was nothing. When dawn broke gray and cold through the narrow window, Leora was already awake. She rose, splashed her face with icy water from the basin, and made a decision. If they wanted her silent, she'd be anything but. She found Miren in the kitchens, kneading dough with methodical violence. "I need your help," Leora said quietly. Miren didn't look up. "No. You haven't heard what I'm asking yet." "Don't need to." Miren's hands worked the dough harder. "I heard about the boy. I heard about you standing up in the hall. And I'm telling you now, whatever you're planning, I want no part of it." "Miren!" "No." Miren finally looked at her, and her eyes were flat and hard. "I've survived here for 6 years by keeping my head down and my mouth shut. I'm not throwing that away for some doomed crusade. They murdered a child. They murder people every day. That's what this place is." Miren's voice dropped. "I'm sorry about the boy. I am. But you can't save everyone, Leora. You can barely save yourself. I'm not trying to save everyone. I'm trying to stop them from killing the one person keeping this kingdom from collapsing." "The king?" Miren laughed, bitter. "The king's already dead. He just doesn't know it yet. And when he falls, they'll come for everyone who stood too close, including you." Leora wanted to argue, wanted to shake her, but looking at Miren's face, the resignation etched into every line, she realized this was already a lost battle. "Fine," Leora said. "Don't help. But don't get in my way either." She turned and left before Miren could respond. The morning council meeting was tense. Leora wasn't supposed to be there. Servants didn't attend council sessions. But Reese had positioned her in a side alcove where she could hear everything without being seen. "We need to talk about security," Reese was saying. His voice was controlled, but Leora could hear the anger simmering underneath. "The poisoning attempt yesterday was coordinated, professional, which means we have a serious threat inside these walls." "Or," Theron interjected smoothly, "it was a desperate act by a desperate child who got in over his head. A tragedy, certainly, but hardly evidence of some grand conspiracy." "The boy drowned last night," Darian said. His voice was flat, emotionless. "Convenient timing." "Accidents happen, sire." Voss spread his hands. "The cells are old. The cistern is poorly maintained. It's tragic, but—" "Stop!" Darian's hand slammed down on the table, making everyone jump. "Stop acting like I'm an idiot. The boy had information. Now he's dead. And you two—" He pointed at Theron and Voss. "You both benefit." Theron's face went red. "This is outrageous. You're accusing us of murder based on nothing but paranoia. I'm accusing you of treason." Darian stood, and the wolf was there in his eyes, golden and furious. "And if I find proof, when I find proof, I will personally tear your throats out." The room went deathly silent. Then Voss spoke, his voice carefully measured. "Sire, with respect, threats like that only prove what we've been saying. You're not well. The stress of command has— Get out! Darian, get out!" The words came out half growl, inhuman. "All of you, now!" The nobles scrambled for the door. Theron shot one last venomous look back before disappearing into the corridor. Only Reese remained. For a long moment, neither man spoke. Then Darian sagged into his chair, head in his hands. "I'm losing it, Reese. Right here in front of everyone. They can see it." "You're exhausted. There's a difference." "Is there?" Darian looked up, and the desperation in his eyes was raw. I almost shifted in there, in the middle of a council meeting. Another few seconds and I would have killed them both. Maybe you should have. And proved them right. Darian laughed, hollow. No. We need proof first. Real, undeniable proof. Otherwise, I'm just a mad king slaughtering his own nobles. From her alcove, Leora's mind was racing. Proof. They needed proof. But where would they find it when Voss and Theron had covered their tracks so thoroughly? Unless an idea struck her. Dangerous. Probably insane. But it might work. She slipped out of the alcove and headed for the lower levels. What? The storage rooms beneath the keep were cold and damp, lit by occasional torches that threw jumping shadows across stone walls. Leora had cleaned down here a few times. It was where they kept the bulk supplies, the spare weapons, the things the keep needed but didn't want cluttering the upper levels. It was also, she'd noticed, where the nobles sometimes held private meetings. She'd seen Voss slip down here twice in the last week, and if he was planning treason, he'd need somewhere secure to coordinate, somewhere away from prying eyes. The question was, where? Leora moved through the corridors slowly, listening. Most of the storage rooms were locked, but a few stood open, their contents visible. Sacks of grain, barrels of salted meat, crates of arrows. Nothing unusual. Then she heard voices. Low, muffled, coming from around the next corner. Leora's heart kicked into overdrive. She pressed herself against the wall and edged closer. Can't wait much longer. That was Voss. He's getting suspicious. The girls made sure of that. Then we moved tonight. A different voice, rougher, unfamiliar. The mercenaries are in position outside the east gate. Once the rations take effect, the rations are gone, Voss said sharply. That kitchen woman found them. We're back to the original plan. Which is? We hit him when he's weakest. Late tonight after he dismisses the girl. His personal guard will be on the night rotation. We've already paid off 3 of them. They'll stand down when we breach the tower. Leora's blood ran cold. And the girl? The rough voice asked. Collateral damage. She's in the tower when we strike. She dies with him. Voss paused. Actually, that's cleaner. Makes it look like a crime of passion. Unstable king murders servant, loyal guards put him down. Council takes control. Very tragic. What about Rhys? He'll fall in line once Darian's dead. Rhys is loyal to the kingdom, not the man. We give him a position on the new council. He'll accept it. Footsteps, moving closer. Leora bolted. She ran back through the corridors, her boots slapping against stone, not caring about stealth anymore. She had to get to Darian, had to warn him. Behind her she heard shouts. They'd spotted her. She took a sharp turn, heading for the stairs that led up to the main level. If she could just reach Rhys, reach the guards. A hand grabbed her arm and yanked her backward. Leora screamed. She was slammed against the wall hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. When her vision cleared, Garrick was looming over her, grinning. Well, well, he said. The king's little pet, sneaking around where she doesn't belong. Let go of me. He backhanded her across the face. Pain exploded through her skull. She tasted blood. I told you, Garrick said conversationally, pinning her against the wall with one massive hand. Told you that you were still nothing. Told you the king wouldn't protect you forever. Leora tried to scream again, but his other hand clamped over her mouth. Lord Voss wants you quiet, Garrick continued. Says you've been causing problems, but me? I think we should have a little fun first. Terror spiked through her. She thrashed, trying to break free, but he was twice her size and wolf blood strong. Then a voice cut through the corridor like a whip. Get your hands off her. Garrick's head snapped around. Darian stood at the end of the corridor, and he wasn't bothering to hide the wolf anymore. His eyes were pure gold, inhuman. His hands had shifted, claws extending from his fingertips. Sire, Garrick started. I said, get your hands off her. Garrick released Leora and stepped back, hands raised. She was trespassing. I was bringing her back. You were hurting her. Darian's voice was barely recognizable. I can smell her blood from here. It was an accident. Darian moved. 1 second he was at the end of the corridor. The next, he had Garrick by the throat, lifted off his feet, slammed against the wall hard enough to crack stone. You think I'm blind? Darian snarled. You think I don't know who's been taking Voss's coin? You think I don't see the rot spreading through my own keep? Garrick's face was turning purple. Please, can't breathe. Good. Leora pushed herself upright, her head spinning. Darian, wait. He didn't seem to hear her. His claws were digging into Garrick's throat, drawing blood. The wolf was in full control now, and it wanted to kill. Darian! Leora grabbed his arm. Stop! I need him alive! That got through. Darian's head turned toward her, and for a moment she thought he didn't recognize her. Then slowly, the gold in his eyes faded back to gray. He dropped Garrick. The warrior collapsed, gasping and coughing. Talk, Darian said. Leora knelt beside Garrick, ignoring the throbbing in her face. Where's Voss meeting the mercenaries? Garrick spat blood. Go to hell. Wrong answer. Darian's claws extended again. Wait, wait! Garrick held up his hands. The East Gate, midnight. That's all I know, I swear. How many? 20 mercenaries, maybe more. Garrick was shaking now. They're supposed to breach the gate when the guard changes. We, the ones he paid, we're supposed to stand down, let them through. Who else is paid off? Darian demanded. I don't know all of them. 4 or 5 from the East Guard, couple from the Tower Watch. Garrick's voice cracked. Please, sire, I was just following orders. You were committing treason. Darian looked at Rhys, who'd appeared at the end of the corridor with a contingent of guards. Lock him up, and round up everyone on the East Guard and Tower Watch. I want them in cells within the hour. On it. Rhys gestured, and guards moved forward to haul Garrick away. Darian turned to Leora. Up close, she could see him shaking, the wolf still too close to the surface, demanding violence. Are you hurt? He asked. I'm fine. You're bleeding. It's just a split lip. I'm fine. She grabbed his hand. Darian, I heard them. Voss and someone else. They're planning to hit you tonight, after I leave. They think you'll be vulnerable. They're right. Darian's jaw tightened. Without you there, the wolf will take over. I won't be able to fight clearly. Then we change the plan. Leora's mind was racing. They're expecting you alone and vulnerable. We give them something different. Like what? She took a breath. Like me. The argument lasted an hour. Absolutely not, Darian said for the 5th time. They were in his chambers now, Rhys pacing by the window while Leora stood her ground in the center of the room. It's the only way, she insisted. They're expecting me to leave like I always do. If I stay, they'll abort the plan. But if I leave and then come back, through the servants' passages, I can be in position when they strike. In position to die, Rhys said flatly. In position to signal you. Leora looked at Darian. You said it yourself. You can hear things normal humans can't. If I'm in the room when they breach, I can scream, and you'll hear it in time to respond. Or they'll kill you before you can make a sound, Darian said. They're not coming for me. They're coming for you. I'll be background noise. She lifted her chin. I'm good at being invisible, remember? This is insane. This is the only play we have. Leora stepped closer. They've covered their tracks too well. Even with Garrick's testimony, Voss can claim he was acting alone. But if we catch them in the act, if we catch Voss and Theron red-handed, leading mercenaries into the keep, there's no talking your way out of that. Darian and Rhys exchanged a look. She's right, Rhys said reluctantly. It's a trap, but it's a good one. It's a death trap. For them, Leora said. If we do this right. Darian closed his eyes, and she could see him fighting with himself. The wolf wanted to lock her away somewhere safe. The king knew she was right. Finally, he opened his eyes. If you do this, he said quietly, you stay hidden. You signal and you run. You don't play hero. Understood? Leora nodded. Understood. And if anything goes wrong, if they even look at you sideways, I'm burning that plan and tearing them apart. Deal. Rhys cleared his throat. We'll need warriors in position. Close enough to respond fast, but far enough away they don't spook the mercenaries. Use the North Tower, Darian said. They can come down the back stairs, hit the breach from behind. They spent the next hour hammering out details. Where Leora would hide, how she'd signal, what the response would look like. By the time they finished, the sun was setting. Darian looked at her. Last chance to back out. Not a chance. He almost smiled. You know, for someone who spent 3 years trying to be invisible, you're remarkably bad at it now. I had a good teacher. I taught you how to survive. not how to throw yourself into danger. Maybe they're the same thing, Leora said. Done. Midnight came cold and sharp. Leora had left Darian's chambers at the usual time, making sure she was seen by the guards, by passing servants. She'd gone down to the servants' quarters, changed into darker clothes, and then slipped back through the narrow maintenance passages that ran through the keep's walls. The passages were barely wide enough for her shoulders, pitch black, and smelled like mold and rat droppings. But they led directly to the high tower, and more importantly, they led to a small alcove behind a tapestry in Darian's chambers. She'd discovered it weeks ago while cleaning, had mentioned it to no one. Now she crouched in that alcove, the tapestry barely concealing her, and waited. The chambers were dark except for the dying embers in the hearth. Darian was sprawled in his chair, eyes closed, breathing deep and even. He looked asleep. Leora knew better. Every muscle in his body was coiled, ready to explode into motion. She forced herself to breathe slowly, quietly. Her heart was a drum in her ears. Minutes crawled past like hours. Then, footsteps on the stairs. Quiet, but multiple sets. Leora tensed. The door opened. 3 figures slipped inside, cloaked, armed. Mercenaries by the look of them. Hard faces, dead eyes. Behind them, 2 more. One of them pushed back his hood. Voss. "Make it quick," he whispered to the mercenaries. "I want him dead before he shifts." The lead mercenary drew a long knife and moved toward Darian's chair. Leora's breath caught. She had to time this perfectly. Too soon and the mercenaries would scatter. Too late, and the mercenary raised his knife. Leora screamed. The sound tore through the room like a physical force. Not the scream of a frightened girl, but something raw and primal, carrying every ounce of rage and terror she'd bottled up for 3 years. The mercenaries froze. Darian's eyes snapped open, golden and furious, and then everything happened at once. Darian shifted, not fully, but enough. Claws, teeth, speed that blurred. He came out of that chair like a bolt of lightning and tore through the first mercenary before the man could even turn. Blood sprayed. The second mercenary lunged with his knife. Darian caught his wrist, twisted, and the snap of breaking bone echoed loud. Voss was backing toward the door. "Kill her!" he shouted. "Kill the girl!" One of the mercenaries turned toward the tapestry where Leora was hiding. She didn't wait. She burst from the alcove and ran, not for the door, but for the window, where she knew there was a narrow ledge. The mercenary grabbed for her, missed. Then Reese and a dozen wolf-blood warriors poured through the door, and the room descended into chaos. Steel clashed. Men screamed. The air filled with the smell of blood and violence. Leora pressed herself against the wall, trying to stay out of the way as bodies collided around her. She saw Reese grappling with one of the mercenaries, saw another go down under a warrior's claws, saw Voss trying to slip out the door. "No!" Leora didn't think. She just moved, throwing herself at him, grabbing his cloak. Voss spun, and there was a knife in his hand. "You should have stayed quiet," he hissed. The knife came up. Leora braced for the pain. It didn't come. Darian was there, his hand locked around Voss's wrist, squeezing until bones ground together. "Drop it," Darian said. Voss's face went white. The knife clattered to the floor. Darian looked at him with something that went beyond hate, beyond rage. It was cold and final. "I trusted you," Darian said quietly. "I let you into my council, my keep, and you tried to kill me in my own chambers." "You're mad," Voss spat. "Unfit to rule. We were doing the kingdom a favor." Darian's other hand closed around his throat. "Where's Theron?" "I can't. Where is Theron?" Reese stepped forward. "East Gate, sire. He's leading the main force. They're waiting for the signal that never came." Darian looked at Voss one more time. Then he threw him to the ground at Reese's feet. "Lock him up," Darian said. "I'll deal with him later." He turned to Leora, and the wolf was still in his eyes, still riding the edge. "You're bleeding," he said. She touched her temple, felt the wetness there. She didn't even remember getting hit. "I'm okay," she said. "You screamed. That was the plan." That wasn't a normal scream. Darian's expression was strange, confused, almost awed. It was something else. I felt it in my bones. The wolf felt it. It almost... He shook his head. What are you? Before Leora could answer, a guard burst through the door. Sire, the east gate. There's fighting. Theron's forces are trying to breach. How many? At least 30. They've got the gate halfway open. Darian's jaw tightened. He looked at Leora. Stay here. Like hell. Leora, you need me. She didn't know how she knew, but she did. The certainty was bone deep. Whatever I did, whatever that scream was, you need it. Darian stared at her. Then, to her shock, he nodded. Stay close to me, he said. And if I tell you to run, you run. Clear? Clear. They ran. Okay. The east gate was carnage. By the time they reached it, the fighting had spilled into the courtyard. Mercenaries in mismatched armor clashed with wolf blood warriors. The gate was open, hanging crooked on one hinge, and more enemies were pouring through. In the center of it all, Theron stood in gleaming plate armor, directing his forces like a general. He saw Darian and smiled. Too late, sire, he called over the clash of steel. Your kingdom falls tonight, like hell it does. Darian didn't slow down. He hit the mercenary line like a battering ram, claws out, teeth bared. Leora stayed behind him, close enough to matter, far enough to avoid getting trampled. Around her, the keep's warriors were rallying, pushing back against the invaders. But there were too many mercenaries, too many, and they were too organized. The defenders were being pushed back step by step. Leora saw a warrior go down, his throat cut, saw another overwhelmed by 3 mercenaries at once. They were losing. Darian knew it too. She could see it in the way he fought, more desperate now, more vicious. The wolf was fully in control, tearing through enemies with brutal efficiency. But even he couldn't be everywhere at once. A mercenary broke through the line, heading straight for Leora. She stumbled back, tripped over a body, went down hard. The mercenary raised his sword, and Leora screamed again. Not out of fear this time, out of pure crystallized rage. The scream tore out of her like a shockwave, and this time she felt it, felt something deep inside her chest unlock and surge forward, riding the sound. The mercenary froze mid-swing, his eyes going wide. Around the courtyard, other mercenaries stopped fighting, clutching their heads. The wolf-blood warriors didn't stop. They pressed forward, and suddenly the tide was turning. Leora's scream cut off, and she sagged, gasping. What the hell was that? Darian was staring at her, and in his eyes was recognition, understanding, and something that looked like fear. Leora. I don't know, she said. I don't know what that was. I do. His voice was hoarse. You're kindred. What? But before he could explain, Theron's voice rang out across the courtyard. Kill the girl! Kill her now! Every mercenary still standing turned toward Leora. Darian moved to stand between her and them, his whole body radiating threat. You want her? He snarled. You go through me. And the battle exploded anew. This time it wasn't just violence, it was fury. Darian tore through the mercenaries like they were made of paper, and the warriors at his back fought with renewed ferocity. Leora stayed on her feet, her head spinning, that strange power still humming under her skin. Kindred, whatever that meant. She watched as Rhys cut down the last of the mercenaries near the gate, watched as Theron, seeing his forces collapse, tried to run. Darian caught him before he made it 3 steps. Going somewhere? Darian asked pleasantly. Theron struggled, but it was useless. Darian dragged him back to the center of the courtyard and threw him down at Leora's feet. This is the man, Darian announced, his voice carrying across the sudden quiet, who tried to poison your brothers, who paid traitors to open our gates, who brought mercenaries into our home to slaughter us in our sleep. The assembled warriors growled, a sound that raised the hair on Leora's arms. What do we do with traitors? Darian asked. We kill them, Rhys said. The warriors echoed it. We kill them. Theron looked up at Darian, at Leora, and for the first time real fear crossed his face. Please, he whispered. Mercy. Darian looked at Leora. What do you think? Every eye turned to her. Leora looked down at Theron, this man who'd schemed and plotted and murdered a 12-year-old boy to cover his tracks. No mercy, she said. Darian's smile was all teeth. The kindred has spoken. and then he tore Theron's throat out. The silence that followed was absolute. Theron's body hit the ground with a wet thud, blood pooling dark across the courtyard stones. Darian stood over it, still half-shifted, his chest heaving, claws dripping red. Every warrior in the courtyard stared, not at the corpse, at Leora. She felt their eyes like brands, weighing, measuring, trying to understand what they'd just witnessed. The girl who'd screamed and made trained mercenaries freeze mid-swing. The girl their king had just deferred to before executing a noble lord. The kindred has spoken. Leora's legs were shaking. Her head felt like it was splitting open. And that power, whatever it was, still thrummed under her skin, demanding release. "What's kindred?" she whispered. Darian turned to her, and the wolf was still in his eyes. But there was something else there, too. Recognition, understanding, maybe even relief. "Not here," he said quietly. Then, louder to the assembled warriors, "Secure the gate. Get the wounded to the healers, and someone drag these mercenary bodies outside the walls. Let the crows have them." The warriors moved, snapping back into action. Rhys was already organizing teams, his voice cutting through the chaos with practiced authority. Darian caught Leora's arm, gently but firm. "Come with me." She followed him back through the keep, her mind spinning. Around them, servants were emerging from their hiding places, eyes wide, whispering as they passed. Word was already spreading. The king killed Lord Theron. The servant girl commanded it. The traitors are dead. They climbed the spiral stairs to the high tower, and Leora's legs burned with every step. The adrenaline was wearing off now, leaving her hollow and shaking. Inside his chambers, Darian barred the door and moved to the hearth, building up the fire with quick, efficient movements. When the flames were crackling high, he turned to face her. "Sit down before you fall down," he said. Leora sank into the chair, grateful. Her hands were trembling so badly she had to clench them in her lap. Darian poured water from a pitcher, added something from a small vial, medicine maybe, and handed her the cup. "Drink." She did. It tasted bitter and herbal, but warmth spread through her chest almost immediately. "What's kindred?" she asked again. Darian sat down across from her, his movements heavy. The shift was receding now, his claws retracting, the gold fading from his eyes. He looked exhausted. "It's old," he said finally. "Older than the wolf blood lines, older than most kingdoms." He rubbed his face. "The stories say that before we learned to shift, before we became what we are now, there were humans who could command us. Not through strength or fear, but through resonance. Their voices could calm the wolf, could force it to submit, could wake it up or put it to sleep." Leora's breath caught. "That's what I did. That's what you've been doing." Darian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Every time you hummed, every time you sang, you weren't just soothing me. You were speaking directly to my wolf, telling it to rest. But I didn't know. Most kindred don't, not at first." His expression was complicated. The bloodline almost died out centuries ago. The wolf clans hunted them, killed them. Because something that powerful, something that could control us, it was too dangerous to let live. Horror washed over her. "So when they find out, they already know." Darian's voice was flat. "You used it in front of half my warriors. By morning, everyone in this keep will know what you are." Leora's stomach turned to ice. "Then I need to leave. Now, before—" "No." Darian's hand shot out, catching hers. "You're not going anywhere." "They'll kill me. You just said—" "They'll try." His grip tightened. "And they'll fail. Because you're under my protection now. Officially." "What does that mean?" "It means," Darian said carefully, "that anyone who touches you answers to me. And it means you're no longer a servant." Leora stared at him. "What am I then?" "I don't know yet." He released her hand and stood, pacing to the window. The old texts, the ones that mention kindred, they talk about them as advisors, companions. Some were bound to alphas as mates, others served as peacekeepers between clans. He turned back. But all of them were treated with respect. Fear, yes, but respect. "I don't want to be feared." "Too late for that." His mouth twisted. "You made 30 mercenaries drop their weapons with a scream. You think word of that won't spread? By next week, every kingdom within 100 miles will have heard about the kindred girl in Blackridge Keep." Leora's head was spinning. This is insane. Welcome to my world, she laughed, sharp and bitter. I was supposed to stay invisible, survive. That was the plan. Plans change. Darian crossed back to her. Leora, listen to me. What you did tonight, what you are, it changes everything. The council was fracturing because they thought I was losing control. But now? Now they've seen you command the wolf. They've seen me listen to you. That's power, real power. I don't want power. I didn't either. His voice softened. But we don't always get to choose. Before she could respond, footsteps sounded on the stairs. Heavy, multiple. Darian's hand went to his knife. Then Reese's voice called through the door. Sire, the council's demanding an emergency session. Darian's jaw tightened. Of course they are. He looked at Leora. Can you stand? I think so. Good, because you're coming with me. The Great Hall was packed. Not just the remaining council members, Voss was notably absent, locked in the cells below, but warriors, captains, even some of the senior servants. Everyone who mattered in the keep's hierarchy was there, packed onto benches or standing along the walls. They all turned when Darian entered, and they all stared when Leora followed. Darian didn't pause. He strode to the high seat and sat down, his posture radiating authority. Then he gestured to the chair beside him, the one usually reserved for his second. Sit, he told Leora. She hesitated. Every eye in the room was on her, and she could feel the weight of their judgment, their confusion, their fear. But Darian was waiting, his expression implacable. Leora sat. The murmurs started immediately. Darian let them build for a moment. Then he raised one hand, and the hall fell silent. I'm sure you all have questions, he said. His voice was calm, measured. Let me answer the important ones. Yes, Lord Theron is dead. Yes, I killed him. He was a traitor who conspired with Lord Voss to murder me and seize control of this keep. We have confessions. We have witnesses. The matter is settled. And the girl? The question came from Lord Patron, young and nervous-looking. Sire, we all heard what she did. What is she? She's kindred, Darian said simply. Shocked silence. Then everyone started talking at once. Impossible. The kindred are extinct. This is some trick. Darian's fist slammed down on the arm of his chair, and the noise cut off like a severed rope. She is kindred, he repeated. I've seen the proof. You've all seen the proof. Her voice commands the wolf, and she's sworn to this keep. Sworn to you, you mean? Someone muttered from the back. Yes, Darian's eyes swept the room. To me, just as you're all sworn to me. Or have you forgotten your oaths? Uncomfortable shifting. With respect, sire, Lord Herrick said carefully, the kindred were hunted for a reason. They're dangerous, unpredictable. What's to stop her from turning that power against us? Me, Darian said flatly. I'm what stops her, because she's under my protection, and anyone who threatens her threatens me. Clear? Herrick swallowed. Clear, sire. Good. Darian leaned back. Now, the real question isn't what she is, it's what we do next. Theron and Voss weren't working alone. They had allies, mercenaries waiting outside, paid traitors inside. We need to root them all out before they regroup. Reese stepped forward. Already underway, sire. We've identified 8 guards who took coin from Voss. They're in cells awaiting judgment. Execute them at dawn, Darian said. No hesitation, no mercy. Public, I want everyone to see what happens to traitors. Nods around the room. What about the nobles? Lady Senna asked. She was older, sharp-eyed. Theron and Voss had support on the council. Are we purging them too? That depends. Darian's gaze swept the assembled nobles. Anyone else feel like confessing treason tonight? Now's your chance. Silence. Lots of people suddenly finding the floor very interesting. Thought not. Darian's mouth curved, but it wasn't a smile. Here's how this works. You're all under watch until I'm satisfied there's no more rot. You'll submit to questioning. You'll open your correspondence for review. And if I find even a hint that you were involved, you'll join Voss in the cells. Understood? Reluctant murmurs of agreement. I said understood. Yes, sire, they chorused. Better. Darian stood. Now get out, all of you, except Reese. The hall emptied quickly, nobles and warriors alike eager to escape the king's presence. But Leora felt their eyes on her as they passed. Some hostile, some fearful, some calculating. When the last one was gone, Rhys shut the door and turned to Darian. "That went better than expected," he said. "They're terrified," Darian said. "Of me, of her, of what comes next. Terror's useful, but it won't last. What do you need from me? Double the patrols. I want eyes on every noble, every warrior who served under Theron or Voss. Anyone who even looked at them sideways." Darian rubbed his face. "And get me a count of our losses tonight. 15 dead, 23 wounded. Could have been worse. Could have been better." Darian looked at Leora. "If she hadn't screamed when she did, we'd all be dead," Rhys finished. He studied Leora with an unreadable expression. "I owe you my life, girl. We all do." Leora didn't know what to say to that. Rhys seemed to understand. He just nodded and headed for the door. "I'll have those traitors ready for execution at dawn. Get some rest, both of you. Tomorrow's going to be ugly." When he was gone, Darian sank back into his chair and closed his eyes. "You should go," he said quietly. "Get some sleep." "Where?" Leora asked. "The servants' quarters? After what just happened?" He opened his eyes. "Point. Besides," she stood, moving closer. "You need me. The wolf's still close to the surface. I can feel it." She was right. She could feel it. Not just see it in his eyes, but sense it. Like a second heartbeat thrumming just out of sync with his own. "I don't want to use you," Darian said. You're not using me. I'm offering." Leora hesitated, then reached out and took his hand. "Let me help." For a moment she thought he'd refuse. Then he squeezed her hand and nodded. Leora started to hum. The melody was the same one she'd used before, her mother's lullaby, worn smooth by repetition. But this time she felt the power behind it, felt the way it reached out and wrapped around the wolf, gentle but firm, easing it back into sleep. Darian's breathing deepened, the tension in his shoulders unwound. After a few minutes, his eyes drifted closed. Leora kept humming, watching his face smooth into something almost peaceful. When she was sure he was asleep, she let the melody fade. Then she settled into the chair across from him and let herself rest. Not sleep. Not yet. But rest. Outside, dawn was beginning to break over the mountains, gray and cold. And in the courtyard below, guards were building a scaffold. The executions drew the crowd. Leora watched from a window in the high tower, her stomach churning as the 8 traitors were marched out into the courtyard. They looked small from up here. Fragile. Darian stood beside her, fully armored, his expression carved from stone. "You don't have to watch," he said. "Yes, I do." "Why?" "Because I was part of this." She watched as the first traitor was forced to his knees. "I helped trap them. I gave the order for Theron. I don't get to look away now." Darian's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Below, Rhys read out the charges. Treason, conspiracy, attempted murder of the king. The sentences were carried out quickly, efficiently. One by one, the traitors died. Leora forced herself to watch every one. When it was over, the crowd dispersed slowly, murmuring among themselves. The bodies were left where they fell. A message. "How do you do it?" Leora asked quietly. "Do what?" "Carry all that death, all those decisions." Darian was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "You tell yourself it's necessary, that you're protecting something bigger than yourself. And you hope you're right." "Are you right?" "I don't know." His voice was rough. "But I keep going anyway." Leora looked at him, really looked, at the lines around his eyes, the weight in his shoulders, the exhaustion he carried like armor. "You're not alone anymore," she said. He turned to her, surprised. "Whatever this is, kindred, power, politics, I'm in it now." Leora lifted her chin. "So you don't have to carry it all by yourself." Something shifted in Darian's expression, something that looked almost like hope. "You have no idea what you're signing up for," he said. "Probably not, but I'm doing it anyway." The corner of his mouth twitched. Rhys was right. "You are insane." "I prefer adaptable." This time he actually smiled. Small, brief, but genuine. It transformed his face. Before Leora could respond, a knock sounded at the door. "Enter," Darian called. A young guard stepped in, looking nervous. "Sire, there's someone at the gate, says he needs to speak with you, says it's urgent." "Who?" "A messenger, sire, from the southern kingdoms." The guard hesitated. "He's flying a white flag, says he's here to negotiate." Darian and Leora exchanged a glance. "Negotiate what?" Darian asked. "Surrender, sire. The southern kingdoms want to sue for peace." Silence. Then Darian started to laugh, sharp and disbelieving. "They want to surrender? Now? After 5 years of war?" "That's what he says, sire." Darian shook his head, but he was still smiling. "Bring him to the Great Hall. I'll hear what he has to say." The guard saluted and left. Darian turned to Leora. "You coming?" "Try to stop me," mocked. The messenger was a thin man in expensive clothes, clearly used to better treatment than the wary circle of wolf-blood warriors surrounding him. He bowed low when Darian entered. "Your Majesty, thank you for seeing me." "I'm not a king," Darian said flatly. "I'm an alpha. Get on with it." The messenger straightened, visibly uncomfortable. "Of course. I bring word from the Southern Coalition. We wish to discuss terms of peace." "Why now?" "Because, my lord, the war has become untenable. Our armies are depleted, our treasuries are empty, and we've recently learned that Lord Theron, who was our primary contact within your keep, is dead." So that was it. The Southern Kingdoms had been counting on Theron and Voss to deliver Blackridge from within. When that failed, they'd lost their opening. "What are your terms?" Darian asked. "We're prepared to recognize your sovereignty over the northern territories. We'll withdraw our forces and establish a formal border. In return, we ask for a cessation of hostilities and a trade agreement." "You're asking me to let you walk away after 5 years of trying to kill me?" The messenger paled. "We're asking for peace, my lord." "Surely that's worth something." Darian looked at Rhys, who shrugged, then at Leora. She could feel dozens of eyes on her. Warriors, nobles, servants, all waiting to see what she'd say. The kindred has spoken. Leora took a breath. "What happens to the people you conquered, the towns you burned, the families you destroyed?" The messenger blinked. I'm sorry. Who are you?" "Answer the question," Darian said coldly. That is, those territories would be returned to your control, of course." "And reparations?" Leora pressed. "For the damage you caused?" "We don't have the funds." "Then give us trade concessions, exclusive access to your southern ports, tariff-free passage for northern goods." She was making this up as she went, but the words came easily. "You want peace? Fine, but it's going to cost you." The messenger looked at Darian. "Is she authorized to negotiate on your behalf?" "She is now," Darian said. The messenger swallowed hard. I'll have to take these terms back to the coalition." "You do that," Leora said, "and tell them they have 1 week to respond. After that, the offer expires." The messenger bowed again, backing toward the door. "Of course. 1 week. Thank you, my lord. My lady." When he was gone, the hall erupted. Half the warriors were laughing. The other half looked stunned. Rhys was grinning. "Did you just strong-arm the southern kingdoms into giving us trade monopolies?" "I have no idea," Leora admitted. "Did I?" "Oh, you absolutely did." Rhys clapped Darian on the shoulder. "I like her." Darian was staring at Leora with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Where did you learn to negotiate like that?" "I didn't. She shrugged helplessly. "I thought about what you'd need, what the keep needs, and I asked for it. Most people don't have the nerve to demand trade concessions from enemy kingdoms. Most people aren't standing in a room full of wolf-bloods who just watched their king execute 8 traitors." Leora met his eyes. "I figured I'd better make myself useful." Darian's mouth curved. Mission accomplished. Over the next few hours, word spread through the keep like wildfire. The southern kingdoms were suing for peace. The servant girl had negotiated the terms. The king had listened to her. Leora felt the shift happening in real time. The way people looked at her, spoke to her. She was no longer invisible. Some people bowed as she passed. Others whispered and pointed. And a few, mostly the younger warriors, looked at her with something close to awe. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. That evening, Darian called another council session. This one was smaller, just the remaining nobles and senior captains. The southern kingdoms want peace, Darian announced, which means the war is effectively over. But that doesn't mean we're safe. The eastern clans are still hostile. The Blackwood mercenaries are still looking for work, and we've just purged a significant portion of our leadership. We need to rebuild, Rhys said. Fast, before our enemies realize how vulnerable we are. Agreed. Darian looked around the table. Which means changes, starting with the council. Nervous glances. I'm dissolving the old council structure, Darian continued. Too much opportunity for conspiracy. Too many competing interests. From now on, we operate with a war council. Smaller, more efficient. People I trust. He gestured to Rhys. Rhys, you're my second. That's not changing. Rhys nodded. Captain Aldrich, you'll oversee the eastern defenses. Lady Senna, you've got logistics and supply chains. Darian's gaze swept the table. The rest of you report to them. No more individual fiefdoms. We work together or we don't work at all. And the kindred? Senna asked. What's her role in this new council? Every eye turned to Leora. Darian didn't hesitate. She's my advisor. She speaks with my authority on matters of policy and strategy. She's a child, Lord Herrick said. She's 15, Darian corrected. The same age I was when I took my first command, and she's already proven herself more capable than half the nobles I've executed this week. His voice hardened. Anyone have a problem with that? Silence. Good. Darian stood. We start tomorrow. Dismissed. As the council filed out, Leora stayed seated, her head spinning. Advisor. Speaking with the king's authority. 3 weeks ago, she'd been scrubbing floors. When the room was empty except for her and Darian, she finally spoke. You're moving too fast. They're going to push back. Let them. Darian leaned against the table, arms crossed. I'm done playing politics. Done trying to appease nobles who'd sell me out for a better deal. This kingdom needs strength, unity, and if they can't see that, they'll see it, Leora interrupted. Eventually, but you need to give them time to adjust. He studied her. You sound like you've done this before. I haven't, but I watched the council in Green Hollow before. She trailed off. Before everything. My father was a magistrate. He used to say that people fear change more than they fear failure. You have to bring them along slowly. I don't have time for slow. Then at least give them something to hold on to, some reassurance that you're not just tearing everything down. Darian considered this. Then he nodded. You're right, again. Don't sound so surprised. He almost smiled. I'm starting to think you're wasted as just an advisor. What else would I be? Darian opened his mouth, closed it. Then carefully he said, I don't know yet, but we'll figure it out. The way he looked at her when he said it made something warm unfurl in Leora's chest. Dangerous, that warmth. Dangerous and complicated and absolutely not something she could afford to think about right now. I should go, she said, standing. People are going to talk if I spend all my time up here. People are already talking. Then let's not give them more ammunition. Darian straightened. Leora. She turned back. Thank you, he said quietly. For tonight. For all of it. You'd do the same for me. Would I? Yes. She said it with absolute certainty. You would. He looked at her for a long moment, then he nodded. Leora left before the warmth in her chest could grow into something she couldn't control. Behind her, she felt his eyes following her all the way to the door. The next week was chaos. The Southern Kingdoms sent their formal acceptance of terms. The trade agreements were signed, the borders were redrawn, and Blackridge Keep slowly, painfully, began to heal. Leora found herself pulled in a dozen directions at once, sitting in council meetings, reviewing supply requests, mediating disputes between warriors who still weren't sure what to make of her. She learned quickly. Had to. And slowly, grudgingly, the keep began to accept her. Some of the warriors even started seeking her out, asking her opinion, requesting she sit in on training sessions. Apparently her voice could help control younger wolf-bloods who were struggling with their first shifts. It was exhausting, overwhelming, but for the first time in 3 years, Leora felt like she was building something instead of just surviving it. One evening, she found Mirren in the kitchens, peeling vegetables. The older woman looked up, saw her, and went very still. I'm not here to cause trouble, Leora said. Could have fooled me. But Mirren's voice lacked its usual edge. Leora sat down across from her. I wanted to apologize for dragging you into this, or trying to. Mirren's hand stilled. You didn't drag me anywhere. I made my own choices. Still. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Mirren said, They're calling you the Wolf Speaker now. Did you know? Leora shook her head. It's better than some of the other names they came up with. Mirren resumed peeling. You've changed things here, girl. Not all for the better, maybe, but changed them. Is that a compliment? It's an observation. Mirren glanced at her. But for what it's worth, I'm glad you didn't stay quiet. Coming from Mirren, that was practically a declaration of friendship. Leora smiled. Me too. Me. Later that night, alone in her new quarters, not the servants' room anymore, but a small chamber near the high tower, Leora stood at the window and looked out over the keep. Torches flickered in the courtyard. Guards paced the walls. Somewhere in the barracks, warriors were laughing. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close. But it was home. And for the first time since Green Hollow burned, Leora thought maybe, just maybe, she could build something here that lasted. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Come in. Darian entered, looking worn but alert. Can't sleep? Too much in my head. You? Same. He moved to stand beside her at the window. Reese says the Eastern patrols are reporting movement. Could be scouts. Could be nothing. Or it could be the next threat. Always is. He glanced at her. You ready for it? Leora thought about that. About everything she'd survived. Everything she'd learned. About the power humming under her skin and the responsibility settling on her shoulders. Ask me tomorrow, she said. Darian huffed a quiet laugh. Fair enough. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the keep settle into night. And for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt alone. Tomorrow came with blood on the wind. Leora woke to the sound of bells. Not the slow toll of morning prayer, but the rapid, urgent clang that meant only one thing. Attack. She was out of bed and dressed in seconds, her heart already racing. Outside her window, the courtyard was chaos. Warriors running for their positions, servants scattering for cover, captains bellowing orders. She grabbed her cloak and ran. The great hall was already packed when she arrived. Darian stood at the center, still buckling his armor, his face carved from stone. Reese was beside him, pointing at a map spread across the table. At least 200, maybe more, Reese was saying. They hit the eastern outpost an hour before dawn, killed everyone. Now they're moving on the keep. Who? Darian demanded. Blackwood mercenaries, best we can tell, but they're organized. Too organized for a random raid. Reese's jaw tightened. Someone hired them. Someone with money and a grudge. Leora pushed through the crowd. Voss? Every head turned. He's still in the cells, Darian said. He doesn't have to be free to send messages. Leora moved to the table, her mind racing. Before you arrested him, he had weeks to plan. He could have sent word out, hired the mercenaries as insurance. She's right, Reese said grimly. Voss had connections all through the Blackwood. If he promised them enough gold, they'd attack even after he was captured. Darian's hands clenched into fists. Damn him. We can worry about Voss later, Leora said. Right now, 200 mercenaries are heading this way. What's our count? 150 warriors fit to fight, Reese said. Another 30 wounded but mobile. The rest are civilians. Outnumbered. And the mercenaries had momentum. The walls will hold, Darian said, but he didn't sound convinced. Not if they have siege equipment, Reese countered, and not if they know our weak points. Then we don't let them get that far. Leora looked at Darian. We go out to meet them. The room erupted. That's suicide. We'd be slaughtered. The girl's lost her mind. Quiet. Darian's voice cut through the noise like a blade. He looked at Leora. Explain. They're expecting us to hide behind the walls, to wait for them to besiege us. Leora pointed to the map. But there's a narrow pass here, about 2 miles out. If we meet them there, they can't use their numbers. They'll have to funnel through, and we can hold them. Until they flank us, someone objected. Not if we collapse the pass behind them. Leora traced a path on the map. There's unstable rock here. A controlled avalanche would seal it off, trap them. Reese leaned closer, studying the map. It could work, but we'd need someone who knows explosives. and we'd be cutting off our own retreat. We won't need retreat if we win, Leora said. Darian was staring at her with an unreadable expression. You've been studying military tactics. I've been paying attention. She met his eyes. You can't afford to lose this keep. So we don't fight on their terms. We fight on ours. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Darian turned to Rhys. Get Captain Aldrich. Tell him to prep the explosives and gather every warrior we have. We march in 20 minutes. The hall exploded into motion. As the warriors dispersed, Darian caught Leora's arm. You're not coming. Like hell I'm not. It's too dangerous. Everything's dangerous. She pulled her arm free. And you need me there. You know you do. He did know. She could see it in his eyes. The wolf was already rising, anticipating the violence to come. Without her there to keep it in check, he might lose control. Fine, he said roughly. But you stay behind the lines. You don't engage. Understood? Understood. He didn't believe her. She didn't blame him. The march to the pass took an hour. Wolf-blood warriors moving at double time, their breath steaming in the cold morning air. Leora rode beside Darian, mounted on a shaggy mountain pony that Rhys had found for her. Around them, the warriors moved in grim silence. These weren't the cocky, violent men who'd shoved her in corridors 3 months ago. These were soldiers preparing for a fight they might not survive. Some of them caught her eye as they passed, nodded. One young warrior, barely older than her, murmured, "Wolf Speaker," as he went by. The title had stuck. When they reached the pass, Darian called a halt. The passage was exactly as Leora had described, narrow, rocky, with steep walls on either side. Perfect for an ambush. Captain Aldrich was already there with his team, setting charges into the cliff face. How long? Darian asked. 10 minutes to finish placement. Another 5 to get clear before we blow it. Aldrich wiped sweat from his face despite the cold. You sure about this, sire? Once we drop that rock, we're committed. I'm sure. Darian turned to address the assembled warriors. Form up. 3 lines. First line holds the pass. Second line rotates in when they tire. Third line protects the flanks. No one breaks formation. No one runs. We hold until they break. Clear? Clear! The warriors roared back. Leora felt the energy shift, fear hardening into determination. These men would die before they let their home fall. She hoped it wouldn't come to that. Darian positioned her near the back of the formation, beside Rhys and a cluster of archers. If anything gets through, Rhys told her quietly, you run. Don't argue. Don't hesitate. Just run. I'm not leaving. Leora, I said I'm not leaving. She looked at him. These are my people now too. I don't abandon them. Rhys shook his head, but there was something like respect in his eyes. You're as stubborn as he is. I'll take that as a compliment. Then the scouts came running back and all conversation stopped. They're coming, one shouted. Half a mile out, moving fast. Darian drew his sword. Around him, 150 warriors did the same. Hold steady, he called. Let them come to us. Leora's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She could hear them now, the thunder of boots, the clatter of armor, the roar of voices eager for blood. The mercenaries poured into the pass like a flood. They were massive, hired killers from a dozen different clans and kingdoms, unified only by gold and violence. They wore mismatched armor and carried weapons ranging from swords to axes to brutal spiked clubs. And they outnumbered Darian's force nearly 2 to 1. Now! Darian roared. The first line of wolf-blood warriors surged forward, meeting the mercenary charge head-on. The clash was deafening. Steel screamed against steel. Men shouted and died. Blood sprayed across stone. Leora watched, frozen, as the battle consumed the pass. She'd seen violence before. The keep was built on it, but never like this. Never this raw, this total. A mercenary broke through the line, charging toward the archers. Rhys stepped forward and cut him down before he made it 3 steps. Eyes up, Rhys barked at Leora. If you're staying, stay useful. Right. She wasn't here to watch. She was here to help. Leora closed her eyes and reached for that power inside her, the thing that had made mercenaries freeze, that spoke directly to the wolf. She opened her mouth and sang. Not a scream this time, a low, resonant note that rolled out across the battlefield like a wave. The wolf-blood warriors didn't stop fighting, but they moved faster, hit harder, Their movements suddenly synchronized, the wolf in each of them responding to her call, aligning with her rhythm. The mercenaries, by contrast, faltered, just for a second, but a second was enough. The line held. Again! Darian shouted, and Leora understood. He'd felt what she'd done, recognized it. She sang again, louder this time, pouring everything she had into the sound. The battle shifted. The wolf bloods pushed forward, driving the mercenaries back step by bloody step. Men who'd been flagging found new strength. Warriors on the edge of breaking held firm, but the mercenaries kept coming, wave after wave, pouring through the pass. "Where's the rest of them?" Reese muttered, scanning the battlefield. 200, we said. I'm counting maybe half that. Ice flooded Leora's veins. They split their forces. What? The attack on the outpost, it was a diversion. They're hitting the keep from another direction. Reese's face went white. We left it half defended. If they breach, they won't. Darian appeared beside them, blood spattered and breathing hard. Because we're ending this now. Aldrich. The captain looked up from where he was coordinating the archers. Blow it, Darian ordered. Sir, we still have men in the pass. I said blow it. Aldrich hesitated for one more second. Then he shouted orders, and his team scattered, sprinting for cover. Fall back, Darian roared at the warriors. Everyone back, now! The Wolfbloods disengaged, running for the edges of the pass, even as mercenaries pressed after them. Leora saw what was coming and screamed, Down! The explosion was enormous. The cliff face erupted in fire and smoke and flying rock. Tons of stone came crashing down, filling the pass, burying mercenaries and cutting off the rest. The shockwave knocked Leora off her feet. She hit the ground hard, ears ringing, vision swimming. When the dust cleared, the pass was gone. In its place was a wall of rubble 30 feet high, and on the other side, trapped, were at least 50 mercenaries. Darian was already on his feet, rallying the warriors. Finish them! It wasn't a battle after that. It was an execution. The trapped mercenaries fought desperately, but they were cornered, outnumbered, and the Wolfbloods showed no mercy. Within minutes, it was over. Leora pushed herself upright, coughing dust, and surveyed the carnage. Bodies everywhere, blood turning the snow-dusted ground to mud. They'd won, but at what cost? Reese, Darian was saying, his voice hoarse. Take 50 warriors and get back to the keep. If Leora's right, I'm coming with you, Leora said. No. Yes. She walked over to him, ignoring the blood on his armor, the wild look still lingering in his eyes. If there's another force attacking the keep, they'll have the same weakness the ones here did. I can help. Darian looked like he wanted to argue. Then he just nodded. Mount up, he told Reese. We ride hard. They reached the keep to find it under siege. Not a full assault, not yet, but mercenaries were already at the walls, trying to scale them with ropes and ladders. Inside, the remaining warriors were holding them off, but barely. East Gate, Reese pointed. They're trying to force it. Darian didn't slow down. He charged straight for the gate, and the warriors followed, crashing into the mercenaries from behind. Chaos erupted. Leora stayed mounted, circling the edge of the battle, looking for... There. A man in dark armor, standing apart from the fighting, directing the mercenaries with hand signals. The leader. She urged her pony forward, skirting the battle, until she was close enough to see his face. He was older, scarred, and when he saw her approaching, he smiled. The wolf speaker, he said. Heard about you. They said you could control beasts with your voice. They weren't wrong. Leora slid off the pony, her legs shaking, but her voice steady. Shame you're on the wrong side. The mercenary drew his sword. Nothing personal, girl, but Voss paid too much for me to walk away now. Voss is in a cell. His money's worthless. Not if his allies honor the contract, and they will, once this keep falls. He lunged. Leora threw herself sideways, hitting the ground hard. The sword whistled past her head, close enough that she felt the wind of it. The mercenary recovered, turning for another strike, and Darian hit him like a landslide. They went down in a tangle of limbs and fury. The mercenary was good, trained, experienced, but Darian was beyond that. He was wolf and rage, and 3 months of barely contained violence finally given a target. It was over in seconds. Darian stood, breathing hard, and looked at Leora. I told you to stay back. You say that a lot, she gasped, climbing to her feet. Around them, the battle was turning. With their leader dead and Darian's reinforcements pressing from behind, the mercenaries were breaking, scattering. Finish it, Darian roared, and the warriors surged forward. By the time the sun reached its zenith, the fighting was done. The keep stood, the walls held, and scattered across the snow were the bodies of nearly 100 mercenaries. Leora walked through the aftermath, her stomach churning. So much death, so much blood, but they'd survived. Leora. She turned. Darian was walking toward her, and behind him, Reese was dragging someone, a prisoner. Voss. They must have pulled him from the cells during the fighting. He has something to say to you, Darian said flatly. Voss looked like hell, bruised, bloodied, his expensive clothes torn and filthy. But his eyes still held that calculating gleam. The contract's fulfilled, Voss said. My allies will honor it. More mercenaries will come. More threats. You can't kill them all. Maybe not, Leora said. But we can kill you. Voss smiled. You won't. You need me. I have information, names, contacts, allies in every kingdom from here to the southern sea. Kill me and you lose all of that. Darian looked at Leora. Your call. Every eye in the courtyard turned to her. Leora stared at Voss, this man who'd orchestrated so much pain, who'd killed a child to cover his tracks, who even now thought he could bargain his way out. She thought about Pip, about all the servants who'd died invisible and forgotten, about 3 years of scrubbing blood from stone while men like Voss pulled strings from the shadows. No deals, she said quietly. Voss's smile faltered. You're making a mistake. Maybe. But it's my mistake to make. She looked at Darian. Do it. Darian's blade was a flash of silver. Voss died surprised. The silence that followed was broken by a single voice from the crowd. The wolf speaker has spoken. And then others picked it up, a chant that grew louder with each repetition. Wolf speaker, wolf speaker, wolf speaker. Leora stood in the center of it, overwhelmed, as the warriors, her warriors now, somehow, raised their weapons in salute. She'd gone from invisible to invincible in the span of 3 months. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it just felt heavy. The cleanup took days. Bodies to burn, walls to repair, wounded to tend. The keep had survived, but it was battered and bleeding. Leora worked alongside everyone else, organizing supplies, coordinating healers, making sure the dead received proper rites. She barely slept. On the 3rd night after the battle, she found herself back in the high tower, staring out at the mountains. Darian found her there. You should rest, he said. So should you. He moved to stand beside her and they looked out at the keep together. Their keep, now more than ever. I've been thinking, Darian said quietly, about what comes next. And I can't do this alone. He turned to face her. I thought I could, thought I had to, but you've proven me wrong about a lot of things. Leora's heart was beating too fast. What are you saying? I'm saying I want you beside me, officially. He took a breath. Not as an advisor, not as the wolf speaker, as my equal. She stared at him. Your equal. Leora, you're kindred, the last of your bloodline. That makes you royalty in your own right, older than any wolf blood dynasty, older than any kingdom. His eyes were serious. If you stand with me, if we rebuild this kingdom together, we could create something that lasts, something better than what came before. You're asking me to be your queen. I'm asking you to be my partner. He hesitated. The rest is just titles. Leora's mind was reeling. 3 months ago, she'd been nothing. Now, I'm 15, she said. I know, which is why I'm not asking you to decide now. Darian's voice gentled. I'm asking you to consider it, to think about what you want. Not what you think you should want, but what would actually make you happy. What would make her happy? She didn't even know anymore. Can I ask you something? She said. Anything. Why me? Really? Not because I'm kindred or because I can control the wolf. Why me? Darian was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because when I look at you, I see someone who survived things that should have broken her and came out stronger. Someone who chose to fight instead of hide. Someone who made me remember why I started this in the first place. Which was? To build something worth protecting. He looked at her, and his expression was raw. You make me want to be better than I am, and I hope, maybe I do the same for you. He did. That was the terrifying part. I need time, Leora said. Take all the time you need. But before he could step away, she caught his hand. Ask me again in a year, she said, when I'm 16, when I've had time to figure out who I am beyond survival. Darian's fingers tightened around hers. A year, she confirmed. And if I say yes, then, if you say yes, we rebuild this kingdom the right way, together. Leora nodded. Then, before she could second-guess herself, she stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. Thank you, she said quietly, for seeing me when I was invisible. Thank you, Darian replied, his voice rough, for making me human again. The year that followed was chaos. The southern kingdoms honored their peace treaty, but the eastern clans tested the borders constantly. Trade routes had to be established, alliances forged, old grudges settled. And through it all, Leora learned. She learned politics from Lady Senna, strategy from Rhys, diplomacy from the southern ambassadors who visited with increasing frequency. She learned to use her voice, not just to command wolves, but to command rooms, to make people listen when she spoke, to turn whispers into action. She also learned about the kindred. Darian brought her books, ancient, fragile texts rescued from forgotten libraries. She read about her ancestors, about the power they'd wielded and the prices they'd paid. Most kindred hadn't lived long lives. The wolf clans had hunted them, yes, but even before that, the power itself had burned them out, used them up. That won't happen to you, Darian said when she told him about it. How do you know? Because you're not using it constantly. You're not trying to control every wolf in the kingdom. He touched her face gently. You're using it when it matters. That makes all the difference. Leora hoped he was right. As the months passed, she watched the keep transform. The nobles who'd survived the purge fell in line, either out of loyalty or fear. New warriors arrived, drawn by stories of the wolf speaker and the alpha king who'd survived betrayal. And slowly, carefully, Black Ridge Keep became something other than a fortress. It became a home. Leora's 16th birthday came on a cold morning in early spring. She woke to find Darian waiting outside her chambers, dressed formally, the first time she'd seen him in anything other than armor or casual clothes in months. Happy birthday, he said. Thank you. She stepped out, smoothing down the dress Senna had insisted she wear. What's all this? You'll see. He led her down to the great hall, and when the doors opened, Leora's breath caught. The hall was packed. Every warrior, every noble, every servant. They decorated with spring flowers and banners bearing the old kindred sigil, a wolf and a voice, intertwined. And at the center of it all, a throne. Not the high seat Darian usually occupied. A second throne, equal in height, positioned beside it. I know it's been a year, Darian said quietly, and I know you asked me to wait. But I wanted you to see this, to know that if you say yes, this is what it looks like. Not me above you, us beside each other. Leora stared at the thrones, her heart in her throat. Everyone was watching, waiting. She turned to Darian. If I say yes, and it's still if, I need you to promise me something. Name it. Promise me we rule for them. She gestured to the assembled crowd. Not for power, not for legacy, for the people who can't protect themselves, for the ones who are invisible. Like you were, Darian said. Like I was, she confirmed. He took her hands. I promise. On my life and my wolf, I promise. Leora looked at him, really looked, at the man who'd pulled her from the shadows, who'd listened when she spoke, who'd made her believe she was worth more than survival. Then my answer, she said loud enough for the hall to hear, is yes. The hall erupted. Warriors cheered. Nobles applauded. And somewhere in the back, Leora heard Mirren laughing. Darian pulled her close and she let him, resting her forehead against his. You ready for this? He murmured. No, but I'm doing it anyway. That's my wolf speaker. The ceremony was simple. No grand rituals, no elaborate vows, just Darian and Lyora standing before the assembled kingdom, making promises to each other and to the people they'd sworn to protect. When it was done, Leora stood beside Darian's throne, her throne now too, and looked out at the faces watching her. Some she recognized. Some were strangers. But all of them looked at her with respect, recognition, hope. She was no longer the girl scrubbing floors trying to disappear. She was Leora Vance, the wolf speaker, the last kindred. And she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Years later, when people told the story of Blackridge Keep's transformation, they'd get the details wrong. They'd say she'd been a princess in disguise, a sorceress, a warrior. They'd forget she'd been just a girl, a servant, someone the world had tried very hard to erase. But the people who'd been there, the warriors who'd fought beside her, the servants who'd watched her rise, they remembered. They remembered the quiet girl who hummed while she worked, the girl who screamed and made monsters stop, the girl who'd looked at a broken king and decided to help him stand. And in the decades that followed, as Blackridge Keep grew into something more than a fortress, as it became a beacon, a refuge, a place where strength and compassion weren't enemies, they'd tell the true story. Not about a hero who saved the day, but about a survivor who refused to stay small, who found power in her voice and used it to lift others up, who proved that in the harshest worlds, survival didn't always favor the strongest. Sometimes it favored the ones brave enough to sing in the dark and refused to be silent ever again. Leora stood on the ramparts one evening, watching the sun set over the mountains. Darian joined her, his hand finding hers easily, naturally. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Green Hollow," she said quietly. "My family, the people I lost." "Do you regret leaving?" "I didn't leave. I was taken." She squeezed his hand. "But if they could see me now, I think they'd be proud. I think they'd say I did what I had to do to survive. And then I did more." "You did," Darian said. "You saved all of us." "We saved each other," Lyora corrected. "That's how this works." Below them, the keep was settling into evening routines. Lights flickered to life in windows. Voices drifted up, laughing, arguing, living. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was theirs. And in a world built on violence and blood, they'd carved out something different. Something that would last. "Come on," Leora said, tugging Darian toward the stairs. "Senna's making us sit through another council meeting. Can't we skip it? You're the king. I'm the queen. We don't get to skip things." Darian groaned but followed her down. And as they walked through their keep, their home, surrounded by people who'd follow them into fire, Leora felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the absence of conflict, but the presence of purpose. She'd started as nothing. She'd become everything. And the story she'd written, the one that began in silence and ended in song, would echo through these mountains long after she was gone. A reminder that power didn't always roar. Sometimes it hummed, and the quietest voices could shake the world.